The moment Ethan Miller looked up from his menu and saw his blind date walking toward him, his blood turned to ice. Victoria Hale, his CEO, the woman who signed his paychecks, who'd rejected his proposals in 3 consecutive meetings, who represented everything untouchable in his carefully rebuilt life. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and in that single devastating second, a simple evening became a disaster that could cost him everything. His job, his daughter's stability, the fragile peace he'd fought years to build. But neither of them walked away, and that choice would change everything. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The apartment was finally quiet. Ethan Miller stood in the narrow hallway outside his daughter's bedroom, his hand still resting on the doorknob, listening to the soft rhythm of Lily's breathing. She'd fought sleep tonight, begged for one more story, one more glass of water, one more promise that he'd be there when she woke up. The promises came easily. They always did. He'd spent the last 4 years making sure she never had to wonder if she was alone. He glanced at his watch. 7:45. The reservation was at 8:30. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another text from Jake, his older brother, whose enthusiastic meddling had gotten Ethan into this mess in the first place. Jake: "You better not be bailing. I already told her you're a great guy. Don't make me a liar." Ethan exhaled slowly and typed back with one thumb. Ethan: "I'm going. Relax." Jake: "Good. You need this, man. When's the last time you did something for yourself?" Ethan didn't answer that. The truth was uncomfortable. He couldn't remember. Every decision, every minute, every dollar had been about Lily since the divorce. His ex-wife, Amanda, had made her choice clear 3 years ago when she'd signed away custody and moved to Portland with her new boyfriend. She sent birthday cards now, sometimes Christmas money. But Lily's daily life, the scraped knees, the math homework, the nightmares about monsters under the bed, all of that belonged to Ethan. He walked into his own bedroom and stared at the 2 shirts laid out on the bed. One navy, one gray. Both boring, both safe. He'd forgotten how to dress for anything that wasn't a parent-teacher conference or a department budget meeting. The navy one, he decided. It made him look less tired. As he buttoned the shirt, his reflection caught his eye in the mirror. 34 years old, dark hair starting to show silver at the temples, shoulders that carried more tension than they should. He looked like what he was, a man who'd learned to survive, not thrive. The divorce had carved something out of him, or maybe it had just revealed what was already missing. "Stop it," he muttered to himself. "It's just dinner." But even as he said it, anxiety curled tight in his chest. Dating felt like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. What did people even talk about on first dates anymore? He couldn't exactly lead with, "So my daughter had a meltdown at Target last week because I bought the wrong kind of yogurt." That wasn't exactly charming. He grabbed his wallet and keys, checked on Lily one more time, still sleeping, her small hand curled around the stuffed elephant he'd won for her at the state fair, and headed for the door. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was already settling into the living room with her knitting and a rerun of some British baking show. She'd watched Lily dozens of times before. The arrangement worked. "Have a nice evening, Mr. Miller," Mrs. Chen said warmly, not looking up from her needles. "Thanks. I'll be back by 11. Take your time. Enjoy yourself." Ethan nodded, though enjoyment seemed unlikely. The drive downtown gave him too much time to think. Chicago's skyline glittered against the October night, all glass and steel and light. He'd lived here his whole life, but sometimes the city felt like a stranger. Too big, too fast, full of people whose lives didn't include bedtime routines and custody agreements. He parked in a garage 2 blocks from the restaurant, some upscale Italian place Jake had insisted was classy but not pretentious. Ethan had looked it up. The entrees started at $40. He'd need to be strategic about what he ordered. The restaurant's exterior was all dark wood and soft amber lighting. Through the windows, he could see well-dressed couples leaning toward each other over candlelit tables, wine glasses catching the light. His stomach tightened. He didn't belong here. This was a world for people who had their lives together, people who didn't calculate grocery budgets down to the cent or lie awake worrying about health insurance premiums. But Jake had set this up, and Jake wouldn't let it go if Ethan bailed. He pushed through the door. The hostess greeted him with a professional smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Miller, 8:30. She scanned her tablet. Ah, yes, your party hasn't arrived yet. Would you like to wait at the bar or be seated? I'll sit, thanks. She led him to a table near the back, tucked into a corner with a view of the room. Ethan sat down, adjusted his napkin, glanced at the menu without really seeing it. His phone buzzed again. Jake. How's it going? Ethan. I just sat down. She's not here yet. Jake. Don't be weird, just be yourself. Ethan. That's what I'm afraid of. He set the phone face down on the table and tried to breathe. Around him, the restaurant hummed with conversation and the soft clink of silverware. A waiter appeared, offered water, rattled off the evening's specials. Ethan barely heard him. His mind was already halfway out the door. What was he doing here? He had work in the morning. Reports to finish. Lily had a dentist appointment on Thursday he couldn't forget. This whole thing was a distraction he didn't need. And then she walked in. Ethan glanced up reflexively, the way people do when movement catches their eye near the entrance. A woman stood just inside the door, scanning the room. Tall, elegant, dark hair swept into a low twist. She wore a charcoal dress that was simple but clearly expensive, and she carried herself with the kind of confidence that made people step aside without realizing it. For a split second, Ethan thought she looked familiar. Then recognition hit him like a punch to the chest. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale and Sorensen Technologies. The woman at the top of the corporate ladder. The person whose name appeared on the company-wide emails about quarterly earnings and strategic pivots. The executive who'd sat across from him in exactly 3 meetings over the past year and dismissed his software optimization proposals each time with polite, devastating precision. His boss's boss's boss. And she was walking toward his table. No, 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 no. This wasn't possible. Jake couldn't have. But Victoria's eyes found his, and Ethan watched her expression shift from polite expectation to confusion to something close to horror. She stopped walking, just froze mid-step, 5 feet from the table, her hand tightening around the strap of her purse. For a moment, neither of them moved. The restaurant continued around them, laughter from a nearby table, the gentle sound of jazz from hidden speakers. But in the small space between Ethan and Victoria, everything went silent. Mr. Miller. Her voice was controlled, professional, but he could hear the shock underneath it. Ms. Hale. He stood automatically, some ingrained sense of politeness kicking in, even though his brain was screaming at him to run. They stared at each other. This was a nightmare, a literal waking nightmare. Of all the people in Chicago, all the possible strangers Jake could have set him up with, how in God's name had it ended up being her? Victoria recovered first. She always did. I think, she said carefully, there's been some kind of mistake. Yeah, Ethan's voice came out rough. Yeah, I think so too. Another beat of silence, then Victoria glanced around the restaurant, at the other diners, at the hostess watching curiously from her stand, and something shifted in her posture. She squared her shoulders, and when she looked back at Ethan, her expression was unreadable. We're both here, she said quietly, and leaving separately right now would cause a scene. Ethan blinked. What? People are watching. She said it without moving her lips much, like a ventriloquist. If we both walk out, it'll look strange, suspicious. He hadn't thought of that. But she was right. The hostess was definitely watching now. So was a waiter near the bar. So what do you suggest? Ethan asked, feeling surreal. Victoria hesitated, then moved toward the table. We sit down. Have a polite meal. Pretend this is a normal business dinner if anyone asks. And then we leave and agree never to speak of it again. It was the most ridiculous plan Ethan had ever heard, but he also couldn't think of a better one. Okay, he said. Victoria sat down across from him, moving with the same composed grace she brought to board meetings. Ethan sank back into his own chair, his mind reeling. The waiter appeared almost instantly. Good evening. Can I start you off with something to drink? Red wine, Victoria said without looking at the menu. Whatever you recommend. Same, Ethan added, though he rarely drank wine. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Silence settled over the table again. Ethan cleared his throat. So, this is a disaster, Victoria finished. Yes, I didn't know. My brother set this up. I swear I had no idea it was you. I didn't know either. She folded her hands on the table, her posture perfect. A friend arranged it. She thought I needed to get out more. Yeah, that's what Jake said too. They lapsed into silence again. Ethan couldn't stop his mind from racing. How did this happen? Who were the mutual connections? And more importantly, how was he supposed to sit here and make small talk with the woman who had the power to fire him? The wine arrived. Ethan took a grateful sip. It was good, better than anything he usually drank, but it didn't calm his nerves. Victoria took a sip of her own, then set the glass down carefully. We should establish some ground rules. Ground rules? For this dinner, to make it bearable. She met his eyes. First, nothing we discuss tonight leaves this table. Agreed? Agreed. Second, we don't discuss work. At all. That seemed impossible, but Ethan nodded. Okay. Third, we finish our meals, thank each other politely, and leave. Tomorrow, this never happened. Right. Ethan swallowed. And if we run into each other at the office? We act normal, professional, as if we'd never met outside of work. It sounded simple. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a terrible idea. But what choice did they have? Deal, Ethan said. Victoria nodded once, a sharp, businesslike motion. Then she picked up her menu, and Ethan did the same, grateful for something to hide behind. The next few minutes passed in strained quiet. They ordered food. Ethan chose the cheapest pasta on the menu. Victoria ordered salmon. And then they were left alone again. Two people trapped at a table neither wanted to be at. So, Victoria said eventually, her tone carefully neutral, how long have you worked at Hale and Sorensen? Ethan almost laughed. They'd agreed not to discuss work, and here she was asking about his job. But maybe it was safer than anything personal. 5 years, he said. I started in the development department right after... He stopped himself. Right after the divorce. But he wasn't going to say that. Right after I moved back to Chicago. You're in software development. Systems optimization, yeah. Mostly back-end stuff. Database efficiency, processing speed. Victoria nodded slowly. You presented a proposal last spring. Something about restructuring our data pipelines. Ethan's stomach sank. You remember that? I remember all the proposals that come across my desk. You rejected it. I did. She took another sip of wine. It was too expensive for the projected ROI. There it was, the same cold calculus that had shut him down in that meeting. Ethan felt a familiar flicker of frustration but pushed it down. This wasn't the time. Right, he said. Well, it was just an idea. It wasn't a bad idea, Victoria said, surprising him. It just wasn't the right time. He looked at her, trying to read her expression. Was she being sincere or just polite? Before he could decide, she changed the subject. Do you enjoy the work? She asked. Most of the time. It's stable, good benefits. He hesitated. I have a daughter. Stability matters. He hadn't meant to say that, but it slipped out, and now it hung between them. Victoria's expression shifted, just slightly, a softening around her eyes. How old? 7? That's a good age. Yeah, it is. Ethan found himself relaxing, just a fraction. She's smart. Too smart sometimes. Asks questions I don't know how to answer. Like what? Last week she asked me why people get divorced. He winced. That was a fun conversation. Victoria didn't smile, but something in her face suggested understanding. What did you tell her? The truth. That sometimes people want different things, and that's okay. And that just because her mom and I aren't together doesn't mean we don't both love her. That's a good answer. She cried anyway. The words came out heavier than he intended. He looked down at his wine glass, suddenly aware that he'd shared more in 30 seconds than he'd planned to share all night. I'm sorry, Victoria said quietly. It's fine. She's fine. We're fine. He cleared his throat. What about you? Do you have kids? No. The answer was simple, but there was something underneath it, something he couldn't quite identify. Never wanted them? He asked, then immediately regretted it. Too personal. But Victoria didn't seem offended. I wanted a lot of things, she said slowly, but I chose a career that didn't leave much room for them. Do you regret it? She looked at him for a long moment. Sometimes. Their food arrived and the conversation paused. Ethan focused on his pasta, which was excellent, though he barely tasted it. Across from him, Victoria ate with the same controlled precision she brought to everything else. Can I ask you something? Ethan said after a while. That depends on the question. Why did you agree to this? The blind date, I mean. Victoria set down her fork. Because my friend wouldn't stop insisting. She said I work too much, that I'm going to wake up one day and realize I've spent my entire life in conference rooms. Is she right? Probably. Victoria's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. What about you? Why did you agree? Same reason. My brother thinks I'm too focused on being a dad and not enough on being a person. And is he right? Ethan considered that. I don't know. Maybe. It's hard to think about myself when I've got someone depending on me every second of every day. Victoria nodded slowly. That must be exhausting. It is, but it's also... He searched for the right word. Grounding. I always know what I'm supposed to be doing, who I'm supposed to be. And who are you supposed to be? Her father. That's it. That's the whole job description. For a moment, something passed between them, a recognition, maybe, of two people who'd built their identities around singular purposes. Hers was the company. His was Lily. That's not nothing, Victoria said. No, it's not. They ate in silence for a while after that, but it was a different kind of silence, less hostile, more comfortable. Ethan found himself studying her when she wasn't looking. Victoria Hale. He'd only ever seen her in suits, standing at the front of conference rooms or walking briskly through the office with assistants trailing behind her. She'd always seemed untouchable, more concept than person. But here, across a dinner table, she looked different. Tired, maybe. Or just human. I read about the community program, Victoria said suddenly. Ethan looked up. What? The coding classes. For teenagers. You volunteer there on weekends. He stared at her. How do you know about that? It was mentioned in your last performance review. Your manager noted it as an example of your commitment to education and mentorship. Ethan felt his face heat. It's not a big deal. I just teach a few kids basic programming. Helps them get a head start if they want to go into tech. Why do you do it? Because nobody taught me. He shrugged. I had to figure everything out on my own. Seemed like a waste not to pass it on. Victoria set down her wine glass. The program's funded by the Hale Foundation. Ethan's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What? The community center where you teach. We provide the grant money for their technology programs. He had no idea what to say to that. I approve those grants personally, Victoria continued. I've read the reports. The success rates are impressive. Kids going on to college, getting scholarships. It's good work. Something shifted in Ethan's chest. All this time, he'd thought of Victoria Hale as the distant executive who shot down his proposals and signed impersonal company emails. But she'd been funding the thing that mattered most to him outside of Lily. I didn't know, he said. Most people don't. That's the point. She picked up her fork again. I don't do it for recognition. Why do you do it? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Because I came from nothing, she said. Scholarship kid, state school, worked 3 jobs to pay for books. If someone hadn't given me a chance, invested in me when I had nothing to offer but potential, I wouldn't be here. Ethan saw her differently then, not as the CEO who rejected his proposals, but as someone who'd fought her way to the top and hadn't forgotten where she started. That's why you're so careful with the budget, he said, understanding clicking into place. It's not about being cheap. It's about making sure the money goes to things that matter. Victoria met his eyes. Yes. For the first time all night, Ethan smiled. A real smile. I get it now, he said. I still think my proposal was worth the investment, but I get it. Victoria almost smiled back. You're persistent. I'll give you that. I have to be. I've got a 7-year-old who asks for a puppy every single day. Persistence is survival. This time Victoria did smile. Small, but genuine. They finished their meal, talked about small things, Chicago's brutal winters, the best pizza in the city, the absurdity of reality television. Nothing deep, nothing dangerous, but it was easy, natural. The kind of conversation that happens when two people stop trying so hard. When the check came, Ethan reached for it automatically. Victoria reached for it at the same time. "I'll get it," she said. "No, I've got it." "Ethan, I asked you out, technically." He felt his face flush. "I mean, I didn't, but my brother did, on my behalf. So it's on me." Victoria looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his expression must have stopped her. "Fine," she said, "but I'm leaving the tip." "Deal." They paid, left the restaurant, and stood together on the sidewalk outside. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of roasting chestnuts from a street vendor down the block. Around them, Chicago moved and breathed, cars passing, people laughing, the city alive. "Well," Victoria said, "that was weird. I was going to say unexpected." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, that too." They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to leave. "Thank you," Victoria said finally, "for not making this more awkward than it had to be." "Same to you." She held out her hand, formal, professional. Ethan shook it. "See you at the office, Mr. Miller." "See you at the office, Miss Hale." She turned and walked toward the parking garage, her heels clicking against the pavement. Ethan watched her go, his mind still trying to process everything that had just happened. His phone buzzed. Jake. "How'd it go?" Ethan looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "You have no idea what you just did." He pocketed his phone and started walking to his own car. The night air felt colder now, sharper. His thoughts raced. Tomorrow he'd go back to work, sit at his desk, write code, attend meetings, and Victoria would be somewhere far above him in the corporate hierarchy, making decisions that affected thousands of people. Tonight never happened. That was the agreement. But as Ethan drove home through the glittering city, he couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd smiled when he talked about Lily, the way her voice had softened when she talked about giving kids a chance. He pulled into his apartment complex, parked, sat in silence for a moment. Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch when he let himself in, the television playing softly. He woke her gently, thanked her, paid her for the evening. She left, and Ethan locked the door behind her. He checked on Lily. Still sleeping, still safe. In his own room, he loosened his tie and sat on the edge of the bed. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Jake, full of question marks and demands for details. Ethan ignored it. Instead, he stared at the ceiling and tried to convince himself that he'd never think about tonight again. He failed. Because somewhere in the back of his mind, a quiet voice whispered a dangerous truth. Victoria Hale wasn't what he'd expected, and that terrified him more than anything else. Monday morning arrived with the cruel indifference of routine. Ethan sat at his desk on the 7th floor of Hale and Sorensen Technologies, staring at lines of code that refused to make sense. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. He'd reread the same function 3 times and still couldn't figure out why it was throwing errors. His mind was somewhere else entirely. Specifically, it was replaying every moment of Saturday night in excruciating detail. The way Victoria had frozen when she saw him, the tension that had filled the first 20 minutes of dinner, and then, impossibly, the way the conversation had shifted into something almost comfortable, almost normal. He'd spent all day Sunday trying to forget about it. Took Lily to the park, made pancakes for breakfast, helped her build an elaborate fort out of couch cushions and bed sheets. But even while reading her bedtime story, his thoughts had drifted back to the restaurant, to Victoria's voice when she'd talked about coming from nothing, to the way she'd smiled, actually smiled, when he mentioned his daughter. "Miller, you with us?" Ethan jerked his head up. His colleague, David Chen, was standing beside his cubicle with a stack of printouts and a concerned expression. "Yeah, sorry, what's up?" "Team meeting in 5, conference room B. Did you not get the email?" Ethan glanced at his inbox. 17 unread messages, including one from his department head sent 20 minutes ago. He'd been so lost in thought he hadn't even noticed his computer chiming. Right, conference room B, got it. David lingered for a moment. You okay, man? You seem off today. Just tired. Lily had nightmares last night. It was a lie, but a convenient one. David nodded sympathetically and headed off. Ethan closed his laptop and grabbed his notebook, his stomach tight with anxiety that had nothing to do with the meeting. The conference room was already half full when he arrived. He took a seat near the back, keeping his eyes on his notes and definitely not scanning the room for anyone who shouldn't be there. Department heads didn't attend routine team meetings. CEOs certainly didn't. Victoria would be nowhere near this floor. He was safe. The meeting started. Status updates, deadline discussions, the usual administrative tedium that filled corporate calendars. Ethan contributed when asked, took notes he wouldn't remember later, and counted down the minutes until he could escape back to his desk. 40 minutes in, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He shouldn't check it. Everyone's phones were supposed to be silenced during meetings. But the vibration came again, insistent, and Ethan found himself pulling it out under the table. An email notification. Sender, Victoria Hale. His heart stopped. Subject line. Thank you. He stared at the screen, afraid to open it. Around him, someone was presenting a slideshow about database migration protocols. Nobody was paying attention to him. He tapped the message. The email was brief, professional. Exactly what someone would send after a business dinner. Mr. Miller, thank you for a pleasant evening on Saturday. I appreciated the conversation and the opportunity to discuss the community programs our foundation supports. I hope we can continue to support initiatives like the coding classes you volunteer for. Best regards, Victoria Hale. Ethan read it 3 times. It was perfectly innocuous. Nothing in it suggested anything other than a professional exchange. If anyone else saw this email, they'd assume it was about work, which technically part of their conversation had been. But Ethan could read between the lines. This wasn't just a thank you note. This was Victoria acknowledging that Saturday had happened, that it had meant something, even if they were both pretending it hadn't. He typed back quickly before he could overthink it. Ms. Hale, thank you as well. The discussion about the Foundation's work was enlightening. I'm grateful for the support your organization provides to the community center. Respectfully, Ethan Miller. He hit send, then immediately regretted it. Was that too formal? Not formal enough? Did it sound like he was trying too hard to maintain distance? The meeting dragged on. Ethan barely heard another word. 3 floors above him, Victoria sat in her office reviewing quarterly reports and trying very hard not to think about the fact that she'd just emailed Ethan Miller. It had been a mistake. She knew it was a mistake, even as she was typing it. But Saturday night had been circling her thoughts since the moment she'd left the restaurant, and sending a brief professional thank you had seemed like a way to close the loop, to acknowledge what happened and then move on. Except now she was refreshing her inbox every 30 seconds waiting for a response. When his reply finally came, she read it 4 times, analyzing every word choice. Respectfully felt distant, but grateful felt warm. And the fact that he'd responded at all meant he'd been thinking about it too. She should delete both emails and forget this entire thing ever happened. Instead, she saved his message to a folder and forced herself to focus on the revenue projections in front of her. Her assistant Caroline knocked and entered without waiting for permission. She'd worked for Victoria long enough to know when formality could be skipped. You have the board presentation at 2, Caroline said, setting a leather portfolio on the desk. And Marcus from legal wants 15 minutes about the contract dispute. I told him 3:30. Fine, Caroline hesitated. Are you feeling all right? You seem distracted. I'm fine. Because you've been staring at that same page for 10 minutes. Victoria looked down. The quarterly report was still open to page 6. She'd absorbed exactly none of it. I'm fine, she repeated, more firmly this time. Caroline knew better than to push. She nodded and left, closing the door behind her. Victoria leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. This was ridiculous. She was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company. She didn't get distracted by men. She certainly didn't get distracted by employees. And yet, there was something about Ethan Miller that had gotten under her skin. Maybe it was the way he'd talked about his daughter with such unguarded love. Maybe it was the quiet determination she'd heard when he mentioned the coding classes. Or maybe it was simply that he'd looked at her like a person instead of a position, and that was so rare in her world that she didn't quite know what to do with it. Her phone rang. An internal line. Victoria Hale. Ms. Hale, it's Jonathan from HR. Do you have a moment? Her heart skipped for one irrational second. Had someone seen them at the restaurant? Was there a policy violation she'd overlooked? What is it? She asked, keeping her voice level. Just wanted to confirm you'll be attending the employee appreciation event next Friday. We're finalizing the guest list. Relief flooded through her. Yes, I'll be there. Excellent. We're expecting about 200 people. It's at the River North venue, starts at 6. Fine. Email me the details. She hung up and exhaled slowly. She was being paranoid. Nobody knew. Nobody suspected. Saturday night had been a fluke, a bizarre coincidence that would fade into nothing if she just let it. The next few days passed in a careful dance of avoidance. Ethan kept his head down, finished his assignments, and made sure to leave the building by 5:30 every day to pick up Lily from after-school care. He didn't check his email obsessively. He didn't scan the cafeteria looking for a familiar face. He definitely didn't replay the dinner conversation while lying awake at 3 in the morning. Except he did all of those things. By Thursday, he'd almost convinced himself he was handling it well. Then Jake called. So are you going to tell me what happened, or do I have to keep guessing? His brother demanded without preamble. Ethan was standing in line at a coffee shop near the office, waiting for his afternoon caffeine fix. I already told you, the date was fine. We had dinner. End of story. That's the worst summary I've ever heard. Was she nice? Funny? Did you get her number? Jake? Come on, man. I stuck my neck out setting this up. Give me something. Ethan moved up in line. It was one dinner. We're not seeing each other again. Why not? Did she hate you? No, it's just complicated. What's complicated? You're single, she's single, you're both adults. If only it were that simple. Ethan reached the counter, ordered a large black coffee, and stepped aside to wait. Look, I appreciate what you were trying to do, but I'm not looking for a relationship right now. I've got Lily. I've got work. That's enough. That's not living, Ethan. That's surviving. The words hit harder than they should have, because Jake was right. For 4 years, Ethan had been in survival mode. Every decision calculated, every risk avoided. It was safe. It was predictable. It was slowly crushing him. I have to go, Ethan said. I'll call you this weekend. He hung up before Jake could argue, grabbed his coffee, and headed back to the office. The employee appreciation event loomed on Friday like a test Ethan hadn't studied for. It was optional, technically, but his manager had strongly encouraged the whole team to attend. Something about showing company spirit and networking across departments. Ethan had planned to show up for exactly 1 hour, make small talk with the minimum number of people required to avoid seeming antisocial, and then leave in time to relieve Mrs. Chen by 7:30. He should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The River North venue was one of those industrial chic spaces that tech companies loved. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a bar that stretched the length of one wall. By the time Ethan arrived at 6:15, the place was already packed with employees from every department. He recognized a few faces, nodded to colleagues, and made his way toward the bar. Ethan, over here! David was waving from a high-top table near the windows, surrounded by 3 other developers from their floor. Ethan joined them, accepting a beer he didn't particularly want, and settling in for an evening of shop talk and forced socializing. For 30 minutes, it was fine. Boring, but fine. Then someone behind him said, "Is that the CEO?" And Ethan's entire body went rigid. He turned slowly. Victoria had just entered, flanked by 2 other executives he vaguely recognized. She wore a deep blue dress and the same composed expression she brought to board meetings. As she moved through the crowd, people parted naturally, some offering greetings, others just watching. Ethan's first instinct was to leave. Immediately. But that would look suspicious. Instead, he turned back to his table and focused very hard on the conversation about next quarter's development goals. I heard she's actually nice one-on-one, David was saying. My friend in marketing said she remembered his name after meeting him once. She's terrifying, another colleague countered. I had to present to her last month and I swear she could see through my soul. That's because your presentation was garbage, Mike. Laughter rippled around the table. Ethan took a long drink of his beer and prayed Victoria would stay on the other side of the room. For the next 45 minutes, she did. Ethan watched her peripherally. He couldn't help it, as she made the rounds, speaking to clusters of employees, shaking hands, smiling at appropriate moments. She was good at this, he realized, the public-facing part of leadership. She made it look effortless. He was getting ready to make his exit when Victoria's path brought her directly toward his section of the room. Their eyes met across 15 feet of crowded space. For one suspended moment, everything else fell away. Then Victoria's gaze moved on, professional and distant, as if Ethan were just another employee in a sea of faces. But she was moving closer. David noticed first, "Oh man, she's coming over here." The table collectively straightened, conversations dying mid-sentence. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. Victoria stopped at their table, her smile polite and practiced. "Good evening, gentlemen. I hope you're enjoying the event." A chorus of "yes, ma'am" and "absolutely" rippled around the group. Her eyes swept across them, landing on Ethan for less than a second before moving on. "I wanted to personally thank our development teams for the work you've been doing. The system upgrades this quarter have been impressive." "Thank you, Ms. Hale," David said, apparently elected spokesperson. "We've got a good team." "I can see that." She paused, and Ethan could swear he felt her attention shift toward him, even though she wasn't looking directly at him. "I've been reviewing some of the optimization proposals from your department. Innovative thinking." Was that directed at him? Ethan couldn't tell. Nobody else seemed to notice anything unusual. "We try," Mike offered, grinning. Victoria smiled, a real smile, not the corporate version, and Ethan felt something twist in his chest because he'd seen that smile before. Across a dinner table. Over wine and pasta. "Keep up the excellent work," she said, then moved on to the next cluster of employees. The table exhaled collectively. "See," David said. "Told you she was nice." Ethan set down his beer carefully, afraid his hands might shake. "I need to head out. Early morning tomorrow." Nobody questioned it. He said his goodbyes, grabbed his coat, and made it halfway to the door before he heard footsteps behind him. "Mr. Miller." He stopped, turned. Victoria stood a few feet away, positioned so they were partially hidden behind a decorative column. To anyone watching, it would look like a brief professional exchange. "Ms. Hale," he said quietly. "Leaving already?" "I have to get home to my daughter." Something flickered in her expression. "Of course." They stood there, two people trapped in a moment that shouldn't exist. "This is harder than I thought it would be," Victoria said, so softly he almost didn't hear her. "What is?" "Pretending Saturday didn't happen." Ethan's breath caught. Around them, the party continued. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. But in this small pocket of space, everything was quiet. "We agreed," he said. "It never happened." "I know." She glanced away, then back. "But I keep thinking about what you said, about teaching those kids, about building something that matters." Victoria, don't. She shook her head slightly. "Don't say my name like that. Not here." He understood. They were standing in a room full of her employees. One wrong word, one misplaced gesture, and everything could unravel. "I should go," he said. "Yes." But neither of them moved. "Would you?" Victoria stopped, seemed to reconsider, then continued. "Would you want to get coffee sometime to discuss the Foundation's programs? Strictly professional." It was a terrible idea. Ethan knew it was a terrible idea. "When?" he asked. "Saturday, 2:00. There's a place on Wells Street. Quiet. We could talk about expanding the coding initiative." It was a fiction, and they both knew it, but it was also a lifeline. "Okay," Ethan said. "Saturday." Victoria nodded once, her expression carefully neutral. "I'll send you the address." Then she walked away, back into the crowd, back into her role as CEO. Ethan watched her go, his heart racing. He left the party, drove home, relieved Mrs. Chen, and checked on Lily, who was already asleep with her homework spread across her bed. He carefully gathered the papers, set them on her desk, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. In his own room, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his phone. This was a mistake. Getting coffee was a mistake. Thinking about Victoria Hale as anything other than his CEO was a mistake. But when Saturday came, he knew he'd be there. Saturday arrived cold and bright, the kind of October morning that promised a harsh winter ahead. Ethan woke early, made breakfast for Lily, and tried not to watch the clock. His daughter was in one of her chatty moods, talking nonstop about her best friend's birthday party next week and the new book series she was reading and whether they could get a puppy for Christmas. "We've talked about this," Ethan said, pouring orange juice. "Puppies are a lot of work." "But I'd take care of it, I promise." "That's what you said about the fish." Lily's face fell. The fish had lasted 2 weeks before she'd forgotten to feed them, and Ethan had to have an awkward conversation about responsibility and consequences. "I'm older now," she insisted. "I'm more responsible." "We'll see." "That means no." "That means we'll see." She pouted but didn't argue further, which Ethan considered a parenting victory. After breakfast, he dropped her at Jake's house. His brother had offered to take her to the museum, and then he had 5 hours to himself before pickup. 5 hours that included a 2 o'clock coffee meeting that absolutely should not be happening. The cafe on Wells Street was exactly as Victoria had described. Quiet, tucked away, the kind of place where you could have a conversation without being overheard. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early and ordered a black coffee, then sat at a corner table where he could see the door. Victoria walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back, and for a moment Ethan barely recognized her. She looked younger, less guarded. She saw him, offered a small smile, and went to the counter to order before joining him. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting down across from him. "I wasn't sure I should." "Neither was I." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "But here we are. Here we are." For a moment, neither spoke. The cafe hummed quietly around them, the hiss of the espresso machine, low music, the murmur of other conversations. "I looked into expanding the coding program," Victoria said finally. "We could potentially double the enrollment if we increased funding." Ethan blinked. "You're serious?" "I'm always serious about the foundation's work." "No, I mean, that's not why we're here." Victoria's expression shifted. "Isn't it?" "Is it?" She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been asking myself that all week, whether I suggested this because I genuinely want to discuss the program or because I wanted an excuse to see you again." The honesty caught him off guard. He set down his coffee carefully. "Both can be true," he said. "Can they?" "I think so." Victoria exhaled slowly. "This is complicated, Ethan. I know. I'm your CEO. There are rules, policies, power dynamics. I know that too. And yet you're here. So are you." She almost smiled. "Yes, I am." They talked for 3 hours. About the coding program, yes, but also about other things. Victoria told him about growing up in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a factory worker and a school cafeteria manager. She talked about being the first person in her family to go to college, about the scholarship that saved her, about the professor who saw potential in her and pushed her toward business school. Ethan talked about his marriage, how it had fallen apart slowly and then all at once, about the moment Amanda told him she was leaving, about the custody battle that never really was because she didn't fight for their daughter, about rebuilding his life around Lily, learning to braid hair and pack lunches, and be enough for a little girl who deserves so much more than a broken home. "You are enough," Victoria said quietly. "The way you talk about her. She's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one." "You can both be lucky." The conversation flowed easily, naturally, without the careful distance they'd maintained at the restaurant. Here, in this quiet cafe, they weren't CEO and employee. They were just two people trying to figure out something neither of them had planned for. "I haven't done this in a long time," Victoria said eventually. "Done what?" "This. Talk to someone without calculating every word, without thinking about how it'll look or what it means for the company." "How does it feel?" She considered the question. "Terrifying and wonderful." Ethan understood exactly what she meant. When they finally left the cafe, the afternoon had turned to early evening. They stood on the sidewalk, the city moving around them, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "We should probably talk about what this is," Victoria said. "Should we?" "I think we have to." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not the CEO, but the woman who'd grown up with nothing and built everything, who funded programs for kids who reminded her of herself, who was standing here, vulnerable and uncertain, because she'd chosen honesty over self-protection. "I like you," he said simply. "I don't know what to do about that, but it's true." Victoria's breath caught. "I like you too," which is exactly the problem. Why is it a problem? Because I could lose everything. You could lose your job. This could destroy both of us. Or, Ethan said carefully, we could be careful. Take it slow. See where this goes. Is that even possible? But I'd like to try. Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. If we do this, if we even consider this, we have to be smart about it. No one at work can know. Not yet. Not until we figure out what this is. Agreed. And we need rules, boundaries. What kind of boundaries? No contact at the office unless it's work-related. No emails that could be misconstrued. We keep our personal lives completely separate from professional. It sounded clinical, safe, exactly what they needed. Okay, Ethan said. What else? We take this slowly. No pressure, no expectations, just see what happens. I can do slow. Victoria nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. I've never been good at this. Relationships. I tend to throw myself into work instead. I've got a 7-year-old daughter and a demanding job. I'm not exactly relationship material either. Then we're both terrible at this. Looks that way. They smiled at each other, and something shifted between them. An understanding, an agreement to try something neither of them knew how to do. I should go, Victoria said. I have a dinner thing tonight. And I need to pick up Lily. But neither moved. Finally, Victoria reached out and squeezed his hand once, brief, warm. Then she let go and walked toward her car. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, watching her leave, feeling like he'd just stepped off a cliff with no idea where he'd land. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. Thank you for today. He typed back, same to you. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Same time next week? She wrote. Ethan stared at the message, knowing he should say no, knowing this was dangerous and complicated and could blow up in both their faces. He typed, yes. Then he got in his car and drove to pick up his daughter, carrying the weight of a secret that was already starting to feel too heavy to hold alone. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm that was both exhilarating and exhausting. Saturday afternoons became sacred, carved out of Ethan's carefully structured life, like a secret he couldn't share with anyone. He'd drop Lily at Jake's or arrange play dates with her school friends, then drive across the city to meet Victoria at different locations each time. A bookstore in Lincoln Park, a quiet restaurant in Evanston, once a nearly empty movie theater where they sat in the back row and barely watched the film. They talked about everything except the obvious danger of what they were doing. Victoria told him about board meetings that left her drained, about the constant pressure to prove herself in a male-dominated industry, about the loneliness that came with being at the top. Ethan shared stories about Lily's school projects, and the teenager at the community center who'd just gotten accepted to MIT, and the small victories that made single parenthood feel less impossible. At work, they were strangers. Ethan saw Victoria exactly twice in passing during those 3 weeks. Once in the lobby, where she walked past him without a flicker of recognition. Once in the elevator, where they stood on opposite sides in silence while 2 other employees discussed their weekend plans. The disconnect was jarring. On Saturday afternoons, Victoria laughed at his jokes and let her guard down. On Monday mornings, she was a stranger in expensive heels who signed his paychecks. But the secrecy was starting to wear on both of them. It was late November when things began to unravel. Ethan was working late, trying to finish a database optimization that had been giving him trouble for days. Most of the floor had cleared out by 7, leaving only the hum of computers and the distant sound of a custodian's vacuum. He was so focused on his screen that he didn't notice someone approaching until a voice spoke behind him. "Burning the midnight oil, Miller?" He turned to find Marcus Reeves, one of the senior managers from the floor above, standing at the edge of his cubicle with a coffee cup and a curious expression. "Just trying to get this done before the deadline," Ethan said, forcing casualness into his voice. "That's dedication." Marcus leaned against the cubicle wall. "How long have you been with the company now? 5 years?" "Just about." "Good track record. Solid work." Marcus took a sip of coffee, his eyes thoughtful. "You know, we're looking for someone to lead a new optimization project starting in January. Cross-departmental initiative, big visibility. I think you'd be a good fit." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Really?" "Really. I'll be putting together recommendations for the selection committee next week. If you're interested, I'd like to include your name." It was the kind of opportunity Ethan had been working toward for years. More responsibility, better pay, a chance to prove he could do more than maintain existing systems. For Lily's future, for their stability. "I'm definitely interested," he said. "Great, I'll be in touch." Marcus pushed off the cubicle wall, then paused. "Oh, and Miller? I saw you at the employee appreciation event last month. Looked like you were having a good conversation with Ms. Hale." Everything inside Ethan went still. "Just briefly, she was making the rounds, talking to everyone." Right. She's good about that. Personable for a CEO." Marcus's smile was friendly, but his eyes were sharp. "Anyway, keep up the good work. We'll talk soon." He walked away, leaving Ethan staring at his computer screen without seeing it. The casual mention felt like a warning shot, even though Marcus had said nothing directly accusatory. But the implication was there. People noticed. People were watching. Ethan grabbed his phone and stepped into the stairwell for privacy. He typed a message to Victoria. "We need to talk. Soon." The response came 5 minutes later. "Tomorrow, same place as last week. 10 a.m. He deleted both messages and went back to his desk, but the code on his screen might as well have been written in a foreign language. All he could think about was how quickly everything could fall apart. The next morning, Victoria was already waiting when Ethan arrived at the coffee shop. She sat in the back corner, her coat still on, a cup of tea cooling in front of her. She looked tired. More than tired, worried. "What happened?" she asked as soon as he sat down. Ethan told her about Marcus, about the project opportunity, about the comment that had felt like both nothing and everything. Victoria's expression tightened. "Marcus Reeves is on the selection committee for senior promotions. He reports directly to the CFO." "I know. If he suspects something, if anyone suspects something, it could derail your career before it even advances. It could derail both of us." "No." Victoria shook her head firmly. "It would derail you. I'm the CEO. The worst they could do is question my judgment. But you're the employee. The power dynamic makes you vulnerable." Ethan had known this intellectually, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. He wasn't naive about workplace politics. He understood how these things worked. A CEO dating an employee was scandalous. An employee dating the CEO was opportunistic. It didn't matter that they'd met by accident, that neither had planned this. The optics were terrible. "Maybe we should stop," he said quietly. Victoria's hands tightened around her teacup. "Is that what you want?" "No, but I have a daughter to think about. I can't risk my job. I can't risk her stability." "I know." "Do you?" He didn't mean it to come out harsh, but it did. "Because you have savings and stock options and a career that's already established. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. If I lose this job, I lose everything." The words hung between them, sharp and true. Victoria looked away, and when she spoke, her voice was smaller than he'd ever heard it. "You're right. I have privilege you don't. I can afford to take risks that would destroy you." She met his eyes again. "Which is exactly why we need to be more careful, not less." "How much more careful can we be? We're already sneaking around like teenagers. We can't talk at work, can't be seen together in public, can't tell anyone what's happening." "I know it's hard. It's more than hard, Victoria. It's unsustainable." Silence settled over them. Around the coffee shop, life continued normally. A barista called out drink orders. Someone laughed at a nearby table. The world kept spinning while theirs threatened to stop. "So what do we do?" Victoria asked finally. Ethan wanted to have an answer. wanted to be the kind of man who could solve problems with clear thinking and practical solutions. But he was exhausted from juggling too many responsibilities and terrified of losing the one thing that had made him feel alive in years. "I don't know," he admitted. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. It was the most public display of affection they'd risked, and even in this quiet corner of an out-of-the-way cafe, it felt dangerous. "I don't want to lose this," she said. "I don't want to lose you." "I don't want that either, but I also can't—" His phone rang. Lily's school. His heart dropped. "I have to take this." He pulled his hand back and answered. "Hello?" "Mr. Miller, this is Nurse Patterson at Oakwood Elementary. Lily's not feeling well. She's running a fever and says her stomach hurts. Can you come pick her up?" "Of course. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Victoria apologetically. "I have to go." "Is she okay?" "Fever. Probably just a bug, but..." He was already standing, grabbing his coat. "Go! Take care of her!" Ethan hesitated, wanting to say something more, wanting to fix what felt broken between them. But his daughter needed him, and that would always come first. "We'll talk later," he said. "Okay." He left, and Victoria sat alone at the table for a long time after, staring at her cooling tea and wondering how something that felt so right could be so impossibly complicated. Lily's fever broke by that evening, but she was clingy and miserable, wanting her father close. Ethan spent the weekend administering children's Tylenol, making chicken soup from scratch, and reading picture books until his voice went hoarse. By Monday morning, she was well enough to return to school, but the weekend had reminded him why his life had to be structured the way it was. Lily came first. Always. He threw himself into work, putting in extra hours on the optimization project Marcus had mentioned. If he was going to be considered for the promotion, he needed to prove himself indispensable. The work was good, challenging. It gave him something to focus on besides the mess of his personal life. He didn't see Victoria, didn't text her, needed space to think clearly. On Wednesday, an email appeared in his inbox. Sender, Victoria Hale. Subject, Foundation Review. His stomach tightened as he opened it. The email was entirely professional. Victoria was requesting a meeting with several employees involved in community outreach programs to discuss the Foundation's annual review. Ethan's name was on the list along with 4 others. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon in the main conference room. It was legitimate, completely above board, and also clearly Victoria's way of creating an opportunity to see him. Friday afternoon arrived with the first real snowfall of the season. Ethan watched the flakes drift past his office window and felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. The meeting was in an hour. He'd prepared notes about the coding program, gathered attendance records, and success metrics. He was ready professionally. Emotionally, he had no idea what he was walking into. The conference room was already half full when he arrived. 2 women from the marketing department who ran a mentorship program, a man from IT who volunteered with a tech literacy initiative, an HR representative taking notes, and Victoria, sitting at the head of the table in a charcoal suit, looking every inch the CEO. "Thank you all for coming," she said as the last person settled in. "I want to discuss the Foundation's community programs and get your input on how we can better support these initiatives." For 90 minutes, they discussed budgets and outcomes and strategic goals. Ethan contributed when appropriate, presenting data on the coding classes and the teenagers who'd gone on to STEM programs. Victoria asked thoughtful questions, praised their work, and gave no indication that she and Ethan had ever spoken outside this room. As the meeting wound down, she glanced at her notes. "Mr. Miller, could you stay for a few minutes? I have some additional questions about the coding curriculum." The others filed out. The HR representative hesitated, but Victoria waved her off. "Just a quick follow-up, 5 minutes." The door closed. They were alone. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Victoria's professional mask cracked just slightly. "I've missed you," she said quietly. "Victoria, I know this is complicated and risky and probably stupid, but I've spent the last week trying to convince myself I could walk away, and I can't." Ethan stood up, paced to the window. The snow was falling harder now, coating the city in white. "I've been offered the project lead position. Marcus confirmed it yesterday. It's a huge opportunity." "That's wonderful. Is it? Because if we continue this, whatever this is, and anyone finds out, that opportunity disappears. And it won't just be about me. It'll reflect on you, too. People will say you gave me the promotion because we're involved. I'm not on the selection committee. I don't make hiring decisions for your level. That won't matter, not to office gossip. Victoria was quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. What are you saying? Ethan turned to face her. I'm saying maybe we need to actually stop. Not just talk about stopping, but really end this before it costs us both everything we've worked for. The words hurt to say, hurt worse when he saw Victoria's expression crumble for just a second before she rebuilt her composure. If that's what you think is best, she said, I don't know what's best. I just know I can't keep doing this halfway. Sneaking around, lying by omission, pretending you don't matter to me when you do. I matter to you? The vulnerability in her voice broke something in him. He crossed the room in 3 steps, stopped just short of touching her. You matter to me, he said. More than makes sense for how long we've known each other. And that terrifies me because I can't afford to care about someone I can't have. Victoria stood, closing the distance between them. What if you could have me? What if we found a way? How? There's no version of this that doesn't come with consequences. Then maybe we accept the consequences. Her eyes searched his. Maybe we stop hiding and just be honest. Disclose the relationship properly. Accept whatever scrutiny comes. Deal with it together instead of alone. You'd do that? Risk your reputation? I'd rather risk my reputation than spend the rest of my career wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to try. Ethan wanted to believe it could work. Wanted to believe they could navigate the politics and the policies and the inevitable gossip. But he'd been burned before. He'd built a life on careful choices and calculated risks specifically to avoid this kind of chaos. Before he could respond, the conference room door opened. They stepped apart instantly, but not fast enough to miss the flash of surprise on Marcus Reeves's face as he entered. Oh, I apologize. Marcus's eyes moved between them, calculating. I thought the meeting had ended. Just wrapping up, Victoria said smoothly. Mr. Miller was providing some additional data on the community programs. I see. Marcus held up a folder. I was looking for the budget projections from this morning's session. Left them in here. He grabbed a folder from the table, nodded to them both, and left. But his expression had been too knowing, his timing too convenient. Ethan felt his stomach drop. That looked bad. We weren't doing anything wrong, Victoria said, but her voice was tight. We were standing too close, and the door was supposed to be locked during private meetings. He has access. Senior management can override the locks. Why didn't you tell me that? I didn't think about it. They were arguing now, stress and fear making them sharp with each other. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. Marcus had seen them alone in a conference room, standing close, having what was clearly an intense conversation. It wasn't proof of anything, but it added weight to whatever suspicions he already had. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Ethan said. We'll handle it. How? I don't know yet, but we will. The confidence in her voice didn't match the worry in her eyes. They both knew they were playing a dangerous game, and they'd just gotten caught making a wrong move. The fallout came faster than either expected. By Monday morning, Ethan noticed subtle shifts. Colleagues who usually chatted with him by the coffee machine suddenly had urgent emails to check. David avoided eye contact during their team meeting. Even his manager seemed distant when approving his time-off request. At first, Ethan told himself he was being paranoid. Then the email arrived. It was from HR. A routine notification that his department would be undergoing a comprehensive audit of project allocations and budget expenditures. Everyone's work would be reviewed. Standard procedure, the email claimed. Nothing to worry about. Ethan knew better. Audits weren't random. They happened when someone raised concerns about efficiency or ethics or misuse of resources. And the timing, less than a week after Marcus had seen him alone with Victoria, couldn't be coincidental. He called Victoria from the parking lot during lunch. They're auditing my entire department, he said without preamble. This is because of us. You don't know that. Don't I? How many times has your company randomly audited a development department in the last 5 years? Silence on the other end. Then, I'll look into it. Victoria, if they find anything, if there's even one mistake in my project codes or time logs, they'll use it as justification to terminate me. You know how this works. I won't let that happen. You might not have a choice. He hung up before she could respond, too angry and scared to continue the conversation. Everything he'd built, the stability, the career path, the future he'd planned for Lily, was crumbling because he'd been foolish enough to believe he could have something for himself. That night, Lily noticed his mood while they were eating dinner. "Daddy, you're quiet," she said, pushing noodles around her plate. "Just tired, sweetheart." "Is work bad?" He looked at his daughter, 7 years old and already tuned into his emotional frequency, and felt guilt wash over him. She'd been through enough disruption with the divorce. She needed him steady, reliable, not distracted by a relationship that was blowing up in his face. "Work's fine," he lied. "Just busy." She seemed to accept this and launched into a story about her friend Emma's pet hamster. Ethan listened and nodded and made appropriate responses while his mind churned through worst-case scenarios. The audit began in earnest on Tuesday. A team from finance descended on their floor requesting documentation and pulling records. Ethan spent hours compiling reports, double-checking every timesheet and expense claim from the past 3 years. His work was clean. He'd always been meticulous about documentation, but the scrutiny was exhausting. By Thursday, the whispers had started. People speculated about why the audit was happening, who had triggered it, what they were really looking for. Ethan's name came up more than once. He heard fragments of conversations that stopped when he approached, saw knowing looks exchanged across the cafeteria. The gossip mill had connected him to Victoria. He didn't know how or what they thought they knew, but the damage was spreading. Friday afternoon, Ethan was called into a conference room. Not by HR, not by his manager, by Marcus Reeves and the head of legal. His mouth went dry. "What's this about?" "Sit down, Mr. Miller," the legal head said. Her name was Patricia Keene, and her expression was unreadable. "We need to discuss some concerns that have been raised." Ethan sat, his heart pounding. Marcus took the seat across from him, his expression grave. "During the course of the departmental audit," Patricia began, "we've identified some irregularities in project billing codes, specifically related to work you completed over the past 6 months. "Irregularities?" Ethan's voice was steady despite his panic. "What kind of irregularities?" "Hours billed to projects that were later reallocated without proper authorization. Overtime claims that don't match system logs. Small discrepancies, but they add up." Ethan's mind raced. He'd been careful. He always double-checked his time entries. "I don't understand. I document everything." "We're not accusing you of intentional fraud," Marcus said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "But these errors raise questions about attention to detail, about reliability. I want to see the specific instances you're referring to." Patricia slid a folder across the table. Ethan opened it and scanned the pages inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. The billing codes were wrong. Hours were misallocated. But these weren't his mistakes. Someone had altered his entries in the system. The timestamp showed changes made weeks after he'd submitted the original timesheets. "These have been modified," he said. "Look at the edit logs. I submitted these correctly. Someone changed them later." "The system shows your user ID on all the changes," Patricia countered. "That's impossible. I never—" He stopped, realization dawning. Someone with administrative access could make changes and attribute them to another user. It wasn't common, but it was technically possible. "This is a setup." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Miller." "So is fraud." Patricia closed her folder. "We're going to continue investigating. In the meantime, you're suspended pending the outcome of this review. Paid leave. You'll surrender your access badge and leave the premises today." "You can't be serious." "We take fiscal responsibility very seriously. If you're innocent, the investigation will clear you. But until then, this is standard protocol." Ethan wanted to argue, to demand they check the audit logs more carefully, to call someone who could verify his account. But he could see in their faces that the decision was already made. Someone wanted him gone, and they'd manufactured the justification to do it. He stood, pulling what remained of his dignity around him like armor. I'll cooperate fully with the investigation, because I have nothing to hide. We appreciate that, Patricia said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe him. Ethan left the conference room, walked to his desk, and packed his personal items into a cardboard box while his colleagues pretended not to watch. The security guard who escorted him to the lobby was polite but firm. By 4 o'clock, Ethan was standing on the sidewalk outside Hale and Sorensen Technologies. Unemployed and accused of fraud he didn't commit. He sat in his car for 20 minutes before he could even start the engine. His phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "I just heard. I'm so sorry. We need to talk." He didn't respond. Couldn't. Because talking to Victoria was what had gotten him into this mess in the first place. Instead, he drove to pick up Lily from school, forcing a smile when she climbed into the back seat, chattering about art class and the snowman they'd built during recess. He made her favorite dinner, helped with homework, read 3 chapters of her current book, and tucked her in with a kiss on the forehead. Only after her bedroom door closed did he allow himself to fall apart. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, staring at job search websites he couldn't bring himself to actually use. His savings would cover 2 months, maybe 3 if he was careful. After that, he'd have to make impossible choices about rent and groceries and Lily's after-school care. The thought of telling her they might have to move, might have to change schools, might have to upend the stability he'd worked so hard to build, it made him physically sick. His phone lit up again. Victoria. He'd been ignoring her calls all evening, watching them come through with a mixture of anger and longing he didn't know how to process. This time he answered, "Ethan, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I was with my daughter," he said flatly. "I know. I'm sorry. I needed to know you're okay. I'm suspended, accused of fraud. My career is basically over. So no, Victoria, I'm not okay." He heard her sharp intake of breath. "I'm going to fix this." "How?" "You can't interfere without making it obvious we're involved. And if that comes out now, it'll only make everything worse." "I don't care." "Well, I do." His voice rose before he caught himself, remembering Lily asleep down the hall. He continued more quietly, but no less intensely. "I care because I have a daughter who depends on me. I can't afford grand gestures and noble sacrifices. I need my job. I need my income. I need my life to not be destroyed because I was stupid enough to think I could have something for myself." The silence on the other end stretched so long he thought she'd hung up. "Is that what you think this was?" Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. "A stupid mistake?" Ethan closed his eyes. "I don't know what it was, but I know what it cost. I'm not going to let you lose everything because of me. I have access to the system logs. I can prove someone tampered with your timesheets. And when they ask why the CEO is personally investigating a low-level employee's billing records, what then? I'll think of something." Victoria, "No, listen to me." Her voice gained strength. "You're not the only one who's scared. You're not the only one with something to lose. But I am in a position to actually do something about this, and I'm not going to sit back and watch you get destroyed for something you didn't do. If you dig into this, people will ask questions. Let them ask." "And what will you tell them?" Another pause. When she spoke again, her words were careful. "The truth. That I reviewed the audit findings and found inconsistencies that warranted further investigation. That's my job as CEO, to ensure the integrity of company processes." It was a reasonable explanation, almost believable. But Ethan knew how quickly reasonable explanations crumbled under scrutiny. "Just be careful," he said. "You too. And Ethan, don't give up yet, please." After they hung up, he sat in the dark kitchen for another hour, trying to figure out how his life had spiraled so far out of control so quickly. 3 months ago, everything had been simple, predictable, safe. Then Victoria Hale had walked into a restaurant, and nothing had been simple since. The weekend crawled by. Ethan kept himself busy with Lily, avoiding Jake's calls and his brother's inevitable questions about why he wasn't at work on Friday. On Sunday evening, after putting Lily to bed, he finally opened his laptop and started documenting everything he could remember about his time entries, his projects, his daily work logs. If this went to a formal hearing, he'd need evidence to defend himself. He was deep into spreadsheet hell when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Miller, this is Patricia Keene from Legal. His stomach dropped. Yes? I wanted to inform you that we've completed the preliminary investigation into the billing irregularities. Her tone was neutral, giving nothing away. And? We've identified a systemic error in the timekeeping software that affected multiple employees' records, including yours. The discrepancies were the result of a bug in the system's reallocation function, not user error or intentional fraud. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. A bug? A significant one. Our IT department confirmed it this afternoon. The bug has been active for approximately 8 months and has created similar issues across several departments. We're issuing a company-wide correction. Relief flooded through him so intensely he had to sit down. So I'm cleared? Completely. We apologize for the inconvenience. Your suspension is lifted effective immediately, and you're expected back at work Monday morning. Your access credentials will be reactivated tonight. Thank you, he managed. We appreciate your patience during this process. Have a good evening, Mr. Miller. She hung up. Ethan sat motionless, his mind racing. A systemic error. A bug that had been active for 8 months. It was plausible. Software bugs happened all the time, especially in complex enterprise systems. But the timing felt too convenient. The resolution too neat. He knew, with absolute certainty, that Victoria had something to do with this. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your company email. He opened his laptop. There, in his inbox, was a message from the IT department detailing the software bug, the affected employees, and the corrective measures being implemented. It was comprehensive, thoroughly documented, completely legitimate looking. Another text arrived. The bug was real. I just helped them find it faster. You earned your vindication. V. Ethan stared at the message, emotions warring inside him. Gratitude that she'd saved his career, anger that she'd had to, fear about what it might cost her if anyone discovered what she'd done. And underneath it all, something deeper, a recognition that Victoria had put herself at risk to protect him, and he didn't know how to feel about that. He deleted both messages and closed his laptop. Tomorrow he'd go back to work and pretend everything was normal. Pretend the last week hadn't happened. Pretend he didn't owe his job to the woman he'd told he couldn't see anymore. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Monday morning felt surreal. Ethan dropped Lily at school, drove to the office, badged into the building like he'd done 1,000 times before. His colleagues greeted him normally. A few asked if he'd enjoyed his time off, apparently unaware it had been a suspension. David caught his eye across the floor and gave him a thumbs up. Everything was back to normal, except nothing was normal at all. Ethan buried himself in work, catching up on the projects that had been reassigned during his suspension. His manager stopped by mid-morning to welcome him back and mentioned that the optimization project was still his if he wanted it. Marcus Reeves sent a brief email apologizing for the misunderstanding and confirming Ethan's name was still on the promotion shortlist. It was everything Ethan had wanted. His career was back on track. The opportunity he'd been working toward for years was within reach. He should have been relieved, grateful, happy. Instead, he felt hollow, because he knew this hadn't been resolved through normal channels. Victoria had intervened, pulled strings, used her position and power to save him. And while he was grateful, he also understood what it meant. He owed her. Not officially, not in any way that could be documented, but the debt was there nonetheless. And debts created obligations, complications, the exact kind of entanglement he'd been trying to avoid. He didn't see Victoria that day, or the next. By Wednesday, the routine had almost convinced him he could move forward without addressing what had happened. Then he received a calendar invitation for Thursday afternoon. Subject: Foundation Program Review. Attendees: Victoria Hale, Ethan Miller. His heart rate spiked. This was it, the conversation they needed to have, the one he'd been avoiding. Thursday arrived cold and gray, the kind of December afternoon that promised snow but hadn't delivered yet. Ethan arrived at the small conference room 5 minutes early and found Victoria already there, standing by the window, her back to the door. "Close it," she said, without turning around. He did, engaging the lock this time. They stood in silence for a moment, the city sprawling below them through the glass. "Thank you," Ethan said finally. For what you did. I didn't do anything except make sure the investigation was thorough. Victoria, I mean it. She turned to face him. The bug was real. IT confirmed it independently. I just pushed them to look harder and faster than they might have otherwise. Why? Because you didn't deserve what was happening to you, because it was unjust, and because… She stopped, searching for words. Because I care what happens to you, even if you don't want me to. The admission hung between them. Ethan crossed to where she stood, close enough to see the worry lines around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. I never said I didn't want you to care, he said quietly. I said I was scared. There's a difference. Are you still scared? Terrified? Of what? Of losing my job, of failing my daughter, of getting hurt again. He paused. Of hurting you. Victoria's expression softened. You can't hurt me any worse than I've been hurting myself trying to stay away from you. We said we'd stop. We agreed it was too complicated. I know what we said, but this past week, watching you go through that nightmare and not being able to help openly, not being able to just stand beside you, it made me realize something. What? That hiding isn't protecting either of us. It's just making us both miserable. She took a breath. I don't want to hide anymore, Ethan. I don't want to pretend you don't matter. I don't want to build something real on a foundation of secrecy. If we go public, there will be consequences. You know that. I know. But there are also policies, procedures, ways to handle this appropriately. She pulled a folder from her briefcase and handed it to him. I spoke with HR, confidentially, about the theoretical situation of an executive-level employee dating someone several levels below them in a different department. Ethan opened the folder. Inside was documentation of the company's relationship disclosure policy. It required notification to HR, confirmation that no direct reporting relationship existed, an agreement to recuse from any decisions that could be perceived as favoritism. There were forms, guidelines, a whole bureaucratic framework designed specifically for this situation. I didn't know we had this, he said. Most people don't. It's not something that comes up often. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. But it exists, which means we could do this properly, honestly. And the gossip, the speculation about favoritism, will happen regardless. People are already talking. You know they are. She met his eyes. But let them talk. As long as we're following the rules, as long as we're transparent, they can speculate all they want. It doesn't change the facts. Ethan looked at the papers in his hands, then at Victoria. She was offering him a way forward, not a perfect solution, not one without risks, but an honest one, a choice to stop hiding and face whatever came together. What about my promotion? He asked. If we disclose now, Marcus and the committee will assume you earned that promotion on merit. Your work speaks for itself, and I'm not on the selection committee, so my opinion doesn't factor into their decision. She stepped closer. But if it makes you more comfortable, we can wait until after the promotion decisions are announced. Put this on hold for another few weeks. Is that what you want? No, what I want is to stop calculating every interaction, stop weighing every word, stop pretending. Her voice dropped. What I want is to take you to dinner without hiding in restaurants across town, to talk to you at work without worrying someone will see, to build something real without shame or secrecy. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. For months, he'd been making choices based on fear of losing stability, fear of repeating past mistakes, fear of wanting something he couldn't have. But Victoria was right. Hiding wasn't protecting them. It was slowly suffocating what could be between them. If we do this, he said carefully, we do it right, by the book. No cutting corners, no special treatment, no blurred lines between personal and professional. Agreed. And if it affects my career negatively, if people assume things or I get passed over for opportunities, I need to be okay with that. I can't resent you for it. You won't get passed over, not if I have anything to say about it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. He set the folder down. You can't protect my career, Victoria. Not if we're doing this honestly. I have to succeed or fail on my own merit. She looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. Okay, you're right. I'll stay out of it. Can you do that? Really? I can try. A small smile touched her lips. It won't be easy, but I can try. They stood there, the decision hovering between them, both knowing that once they crossed this line, there was no going back. The safe, predictable life Ethan had built would change. The careful boundaries Victoria had maintained between personal and professional would blur. Everything would become more complicated. My daughter, Ethan said, this isn't just about me. If we do this, eventually she'll be part of it, and if it doesn't work out, I know. Victoria's expression grew serious. I've thought about that, about what it would mean to be in her life, about the responsibility that comes with that. And I know I can't make promises about the future, but I can promise that I won't take that lightly, that I won't treat her as an afterthought or an inconvenience. She's the most important person in my world. I know, and I respect that. I want to respect that. She hesitated. I'd like to meet her, when you're ready, when it feels right. The idea of introducing Lily to Victoria terrified him, but it also felt inevitable. If they were going to do this, really do this, his daughter would be part of it. She'd have to be. Not yet, he said. Let's get through the disclosure first, see how the office handles it. Make sure we're on solid ground before we bring her into this. That's fair. Ethan picked up the folder again, flipping through the forms. The bureaucracy of romance. He almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but this was the price of doing things properly, of choosing honesty over convenience. When do we file? He asked. Whenever you're ready. He met her eyes. I'm ready. Victoria exhaled slowly, and he realized she'd been holding her breath. Okay, we'll schedule a meeting with HR. They'll walk us through the process, have us sign the disclosure forms, update the records. And then we see what happens. She moved closer, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan didn't step back. We deal with the questions and the gossip and the scrutiny together. Together, he repeated, testing the word. Victoria reached for his hand. Her fingers were cool, slightly trembling. I'm scared too, you know. This isn't easy for me either. I know. But I think it's worth it. I think you're worth it. Something in Ethan's chest loosened. He'd spent so long thinking about what this could cost him that he'd forgotten to consider what it could give him. Not just romance or companionship, but partnership. Someone who understood the weight of responsibility, who'd fought her own battles, who looked at him and saw potential instead of limitation. We should probably stop holding hands in a conference room, he said, but he didn't let go. Probably, Victoria smiled. Want to get dinner after work? Somewhere public. Somewhere we don't have to hide. What about the disclosure? Shouldn't we wait until... We're filing the paperwork tomorrow. As far as I'm concerned, we're already official. We might as well start acting like it. It was a small rebellion, but it felt significant. Ethan found himself smiling. Okay, dinner, public, no hiding. It's a date. They separated, maintaining appropriate professional distance as they gathered their things. Before opening the door, Victoria turned back to him. Thank you, she said. For what? For giving this a chance. For being brave enough to try. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. That's what makes it brave. The HR meeting happened Friday morning. Ethan sat across from a pleasant woman named Jennifer, who explained the disclosure policy with the same neutral efficiency she might use to discuss health insurance enrollment. They signed forms, answered questions about their respective roles and departments, confirmed that no direct reporting relationship existed, and that neither would participate in decisions affecting the other's employment. The whole process took 30 minutes. That's it? Ethan asked as Jennifer filed the paperwork. That's it. Your relationship is now officially disclosed and documented. We'll notify your respective managers and update the relevant records. Is there anything else you need? They shook their heads. Jennifer smiled. Then congratulations, and thank you for handling this properly. You'd be surprised how many people don't. They left the HR office together, walking side by side down the hallway. It felt strange, liberating and terrifying in equal measure. People glanced at them as they passed. Ethan wondered if they knew. If the gossip had already started spreading, if this had been a terrible mistake. Then Victoria's hand brushed against his, brief barely noticeable, and he remembered why they were doing this. The gossip did start, exactly as predicted. By Monday, half the office seemed to know that the CEO and a development team programmer had disclosed a relationship. Reactions varied. Some people were supportive. Others speculated openly about favoritism and impropriety. Ethan heard whispers in the break room, saw knowing looks exchanged in meetings. David pulled him aside to ask if he'd lost his mind. Marcus Reeves sent an email requesting a meeting to discuss professional boundaries. Through it all, Victoria remained steady. She didn't hide their relationship, but she didn't flaunt it either. At work, they maintained professional distance. No public displays of affection, no personal conversations in common areas, no behavior that could be construed as inappropriate. But everyone knew. And slowly, gradually, the novelty wore off. People found other things to gossip about. Work continued. The promotion decision came 3 weeks later. Ethan was in a code review when his manager called him into her office. "I wanted to tell you personally," she said, smiling. "You got the project lead position. Congratulations." Relief and vindication flooded through him in equal measure. "Thank you. You earned it. The committee was unanimous. Your technical skills, your leadership with the coding program, your handling of that audit situation, everything pointed to you being the right choice." She paused. "I'm going to be direct. Some people questioned whether your relationship with Ms. Hale influenced the decision, but she recused herself from any discussion about your candidacy, and the committee made this choice based solely on merit. I wanted you to know that. I appreciate you telling me. You've worked hard for this. Don't let anyone diminish that." Ethan left her office feeling lighter than he had in months. The promotion was his, earned fairly, chosen cleanly, untainted by accusations of favoritism. It wouldn't stop everyone from speculating, but it was enough. He texted Victoria. "I got it." Her response came immediately. "I never doubted it. Congratulations. Dinner tonight to celebrate?" "Can't. Lily has a school concert. Rain check?" "Of course. Tell her I said good luck." Ethan stared at the message. Victoria had never met Lily, didn't know anything about her beyond what Ethan had shared, but she'd remembered the concert he'd mentioned days ago, had thought to send encouragement. Maybe it was time to change that. That evening, sitting in an elementary school auditorium watching his daughter sing slightly off-key in a choir of 7-year-olds, Ethan made a decision. If this relationship with Victoria was going to be real, not just disclosed on paper, but genuinely integrated into his life, then she needed to meet the most important person in it. After the concert, after ice cream and bedtime and Lily's excited retelling of every moment on stage, Ethan sat on the edge of her bed for their nightly talk. "Hey, kiddo, can I ask you something?" Lily looked up from her stuffed elephant. "What?" "How would you feel if Daddy started spending time with someone? A friend, someone I like?" His daughter's eyes widened. "Like a girlfriend?" "Maybe. Would that be okay?" She considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd spent years in a single-parent household. "Is she nice?" "Very nice." "Does she like kids?" "I think so." "What's her name?" "Victoria." Lily tested the name silently. "Okay, you can have a girlfriend, but you still have to read me stories." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Always, sweetheart. That's never going to change. And she has to like elephants, because Mr. Trunks is very important. I'll make sure she knows." Lily yawned, settling deeper into her pillow. "Can I meet her? Would you want to?" "Yeah. I want to see if she's nice, like you said." "Okay, we'll arrange something soon, but remember, I know, Daddy, just because you like her doesn't mean you don't love me." The fact that his 7-year-old daughter had to say that out loud broke his heart a little, but she was smiling, secure in the knowledge that his love for her was unconditional and unchanging. "That's exactly right," he said, kissing her forehead. "Sleep tight, sweetheart." 2 weeks before Christmas, Ethan arranged for Victoria to meet Lily. Not at his apartment, that felt too intimate, too much pressure. Instead, they met at the Museum of Science and Industry on a Saturday afternoon. Neutral territory where a 7-year-old could be distracted by exhibits if things got awkward. Ethan saw Victoria before Lily did. She stood near the entrance, looking nervous in jeans and a sweater he'd never seen before, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When she spotted them, Her face transformed with a smile that was equal parts hope and terror. "Hi," she said as they approached. "Hi." Ethan touched Lily's shoulder. "Lily, this is Victoria. Victoria, this is my daughter, Lily." Lily looked up at Victoria with the frank, assessing gaze children use when meeting important adults. "You're taller than I thought." Victoria laughed, genuinely delighted. "I get that a lot. You're exactly as wonderful as your dad said." "He talks about me?" "All the time. He's very proud of you." Lily considered this. "Do you like elephants?" Victoria didn't miss a beat. "I do. Especially the smart ones who can paint and solve puzzles. Mr. Trunks can't paint, but he's a very good listener. That's an important quality." Ethan watched the exchange, something warm and terrifying unfolding in his chest. This was real now. Not just forms filed with HR or dinners in public restaurants. This was his daughter and the woman he was falling for, meeting for the first time, and the stakes felt impossibly high. They spent 3 hours at the museum. Victoria followed Lily from exhibit to exhibit, asking questions and listening to long, rambling explanations about planets and dinosaurs and how submarines work. She didn't talk down to Lily or try too hard to impress her. She just paid attention, genuinely interested in what a 7-year-old thought was important. At the gift shop, Lily spotted a book about elephants and looked at her father with pleading eyes. "You already have 3 books about elephants," Ethan pointed out, "but not this one." "But tell you what," Victoria said, crouching down to Lily's level. "How about I get you that book as a present for being such a great museum guide today?" Lily's face lit up. "Really?" "Really, but you have to promise to tell me 3 interesting elephant facts the next time I see you." "I can tell you 10 facts. Even better." They bought the book. On the walk to the parking lot, Lily slipped her hand into Victoria's without hesitation, chattering about her favorite exhibit. Ethan watched them together and felt something slot into place. This could work. It wouldn't be simple, and there would be challenges, but it could work. At the car, Victoria handed Lily the book and smiled. "I had a really wonderful time today." "Me too," Lily said. Then with the directness only children possess, "Are you going to be my dad's girlfriend for real?" Victoria glanced at Ethan, who nodded slightly, giving her permission to answer honestly. "I hope so," Victoria said. "If that's okay with you." Lily thought about it. "It's okay, but you have to be nice to him. And to me. And to Mr. Trunks." "I promise." "Okay then." Lily hugged Victoria briefly, then climbed into the car. After she was buckled in, Ethan turned to Victoria. "That went well." "She's amazing." "She likes you." "The feeling's mutual." Victoria's eyes were bright. "Thank you for trusting me with this. I know it wasn't easy." "Thank you for showing up, for being exactly what she needed." They stood there for a moment, the museum visitors streaming past them, a cold December wind cutting through the parking lot. "So," Victoria said, "girlfriend for real?" "For real," Ethan confirmed. She smiled, and he saw in her face the same cautious hope he felt. They were building something new, something neither had expected, something that required courage and honesty and trust. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be complications and challenges and moments of doubt. But as Ethan drove home with Lily chattering happily in the back seat about her new book, he realized he was ready for it. Ready to stop hiding, stop protecting himself, stop living in survival mode. Ready to choose hope over fear. Ready to try. The months that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both new and surprisingly natural. Ethan's promotion came with longer hours and more responsibility, but also with the financial breathing room he'd been chasing for years. He could afford a better apartment now, one with a second bathroom, and a small yard where Lily talked endlessly about the puppy she still desperately wanted. Victoria became a regular presence in their lives. Saturday museum trips, Sunday brunches, quiet evenings where she'd help Lily with homework while Ethan cooked dinner. At work, they maintained their professional boundaries with careful precision. No one could accuse them of impropriety because there was none to find. Ethan reported to his department head, Victoria focused on executive-level strategy, and their paths crossed no more frequently than before. The gossip gradually died down, replaced by newer scandals and office politics. People accepted their relationship as fact and moved on. But acceptance at the office didn't mean everything was easy. There were still moments when Ethan felt the weight of their different worlds. Victoria traveled frequently for board meetings and investor conferences, sometimes gone for days at a time. Her calendar was a complex puzzle of obligations that left little room for spontaneity. And while she'd proven herself wonderful with Lily, there were still gaps in understanding what it meant to be a parent. The constant low-level worry, the inability to ever fully relax, the way every decision had to be filtered through the question of what was best for a child. It came to a head on a Tuesday in late March. Ethan had been juggling a critical project deadline with Lily's spring break, trying to work from home while keeping a restless 8-year-old entertained. Victoria had been in New York for 3 days at a conference, and they'd barely spoken beyond brief text exchanges. When she finally called that evening, Ethan was exhausted and short-tempered. "How's the conference?" he asked, scraping burnt chicken off a pan while Lily complained about being bored from the living room. "Productive. Long. I should be back Friday." Victoria paused. "You sound stressed." "I am stressed. I've got deliverables due tomorrow. Lily's been home all week, and I just ruined dinner." "I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do?" "Unless you can magically finish my code review from New York, not really." The words came out harsher than he'd intended. He heard Victoria's intake of breath on the other end. "I know this is hard," she said carefully. "But it's temporary. The project will wrap up, spring break will end. It's not temporary, Victoria. This is my life. Every week there's something, a deadline, or a sick day, or a school event I can't miss. And you're in New York, or San Francisco, or wherever, living in hotel rooms and eating catered meals, and I'm here burning chicken and trying to hold everything together." Silence stretched between them. Lily appeared in the doorway, sensing the tension. "Is everything okay, Daddy?" "It's fine, sweetheart. Go watch your show." She hesitated, then retreated. Ethan closed his eyes, immediately regretting the outburst. "I'm sorry," he said. "That wasn't fair." "No, it was honest." Victoria's voice was quiet. "You're right. I don't fully understand what you're dealing with because I don't live it every day, but I want to understand, Ethan. I want to help. You just have to tell me how." "I don't know how. I've been doing this alone for so long, I don't know how to let someone else share the load." "Then maybe we need to figure that out together." They talked for another hour after that. Really talked. About expectations and limitations and the reality that their lives were fundamentally different in ways that required constant navigation. About the fact that Victoria couldn't drop everything when Ethan was overwhelmed, but she could be more present when she was available. About how Ethan needed to actually ask for help instead of assuming she wouldn't understand. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was honest, and it was a start. Victoria came back from New York on Thursday instead of Friday, showing up at Ethan's apartment with takeout and an offer to watch Lily while he finished his project work. She didn't make a big deal out of it, didn't act like she was swooping in to save the day. She just helped. Played board games with Lily, made sure she brushed her teeth, read her a bedtime story while Ethan worked late into the night. When he finally emerged from his makeshift home office at midnight, he found Victoria asleep on his couch, her laptop open beside her with what looked like quarterly reports. He stood there for a moment, watching her. This brilliant, powerful woman who ran a billion-dollar company had rearranged her schedule to help him through a rough week. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. Because she cared. He gently closed her laptop and covered her with a blanket. She stirred slightly. "Did you finish?" she murmured, half asleep. "I finished. Thank you for being here." Where else would I be? It was such a simple question, but it carried weight. Where else would she be? In a hotel room, preparing for another meeting. At her own apartment, maintaining the careful separation between her professional and personal lives. Anywhere but on his couch at midnight, having sacrificed her own work to support his. "Come on," he said softly. "Take the bed. I'll sleep out here. Don't be ridiculous. I'm fine." Victoria. "We're both adults. We can share a bed without making it weird." She opened one eye. "Unless you're saying you can't control yourself around me." Despite everything, he laughed. "I think I can manage." They ended up both in his bed, fully clothed and carefully maintaining space between them, which lasted all of 10 minutes before Victoria unconsciously rolled toward him and Ethan found himself holding her. It felt right in a way that terrified him. Natural, like something that could become permanent if he let it. Summer brought new challenges and unexpected joys. Lily's school year ended with excellent grades and an announcement that she'd been selected for an advanced reading program in the fall. Ethan's project launched successfully, earning praise from senior leadership and cementing his reputation as someone who could deliver under pressure. And Victoria's foundation expanded the coding program to 3 new community centers, creating opportunities for dozens more teenagers. They celebrated Lily's 8th birthday at the zoo, where Victoria surprised her with an elephant adoption certificate. Lily was ecstatic, insisting on reading every fact about her elephant to anyone who would listen. Later, as they sat on a bench watching Lily sketch the elephants in her new journal, Victoria leaned against Ethan's shoulder. "I've been thinking," she said. About? About the future. About what we're building here." Ethan's heart rate picked up. "And what are we building?" "I don't know exactly, but it feels like something permanent, something that matters." She looked up at him. "Does that scare you?" "Terrifies me," he admitted, "but in a different way than before." "What's different?" "Before I was scared of losing what I had. Now I'm scared of how much I want this. How much I want you. How much Lily's starting to depend on you being around." Victoria was quiet for a moment, watching Lily sketch. "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her tone made Ethan tense. "Okay." "I've been offered a position, board seat at a tech company in California. It would mean relocating to San Francisco, at least part-time, maybe full-time eventually." Everything inside Ethan went cold. When did this happen? "The offer came last week. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." "Are you taking it?" "I don't know. It's an incredible opportunity. The kind of thing I've worked toward my entire career, but it would mean leaving Chicago, leaving Hale and Sorensen, leaving—" She trailed off. "Leaving us," Ethan finished. "I haven't decided. I wanted to talk to you first, to see if there's a way to make it work." "Long distance, with you in California and us here?" "It's not ideal, but people do it." Ethan thought about what that would mean. Seeing Victoria once a month if they were lucky. Phone calls and video chats replacing actual presence. Lily asking when Victoria was coming back, the disappointment when the answer was not yet. The slow erosion of what they'd built as distance and time did their inevitable damage. "I can't ask you to turn it down," he said. "That wouldn't be fair." "You're not asking. I'm choosing." "Are you? Or are you just afraid to admit you want this more than you want us?" The words came out bitter. Victoria pulled back, hurt flashing across her face. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? This is your dream. California, board seats, climbing higher. What are we compared to that? Just the relationship you fit in around the edges of your real life." "You know that's not true." "Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the moment something bigger came along, you started planning your exit." They were arguing in public, voices tight and controlled, but emotions running hot. Lily glanced over, concerned. Ethan forced himself to smile and wave. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Keep drawing." "Can we not do this here?" Victoria said quietly. "Where then? At your place while you're packing? Or should we wait until you're already gone?" "I haven't accepted anything. I came to you first because what we have matters to me. Because you matter. Because Lily matters." Her voice cracked slightly. "I don't want to lose this, but I also don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what I gave up." The honesty of it stopped Ethan cold, because he understood. He'd given up parts of himself over the years, dreams and ambitions and possibilities, to build a stable life for his daughter. He'd never regretted those choices, but he understood the weight of sacrifice, the wondering about roads not taken. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have said that. About you planning your exit." "You're scared, I get it. So am I." They sat in silence, watching Lily sketch, the elephant enclosure spreading out before them. Around them, families laughed and children squealed and life continued in its oblivious way. "What if I didn't go to California?" Victoria said finally. You'd resent me, eventually. You don't know that. I do. Because I'd resent me if I were you. Ethan turned to look at her. You've worked your entire life to build your career. You came from nothing and created everything. I can't be the reason you stop reaching for more. What if you're not a reason to stop? What if you're a reason to choose differently? What does that mean? Victoria took a breath, seeming to gather her courage. What if I turned down California and stepped back from the CEO role? Not completely. I could stay on the board, transition to an advisory position. But I could have time, real time, for you, for Lily, for building something that isn't about quarterly earnings and shareholder value. Ethan stared at her. You can't do that. Why not? Because being CEO is who you are. It's what you've built your entire identity around. Maybe. Or maybe I've been hiding in work because it was easier than admitting I wanted something else too. She reached for his hand. I've spent 15 years proving I could run a company. Maybe it's time to prove I can have a life outside of it. Victoria, if you do this and regret it, if you wake up in 5 years and resent me for it, then that's on me, not you. I'm a grown woman, Ethan. I can make my own choices and live with the consequences. Lily came running over, her journal clutched to her chest. Look, I drew our elephant with her baby. She showed them the sketch, surprisingly good for an 8-year-old, showing an adult elephant with its trunk wrapped protectively around a smaller one. That's beautiful, sweetheart, Ethan said. The mom elephant never leaves her baby, Lily informed them seriously. She always stays close to protect it. That's what families do. She ran off again, back to the enclosure for more observation. Victoria and Ethan looked at each other. Out of the mouths of babes, Victoria said softly, she doesn't understand what she's asking of you. Maybe not, but she understands what matters, and so do I. Victoria squeezed his hand. I'm going to turn down California, and I'm going to transition out of the CEO role. Not immediately. I'll need 6 months to find the right successor and ensure a smooth handover, but I'm going to do it. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. The transition happened gradually over the summer and into fall. Victoria announced her intention to step back from day-to-day operations, citing a desire to focus on the foundation and advisory work. The business press speculated about her reasons. Some praised her for prioritizing work-life balance. Others questioned whether she was being pushed out. She ignored all of it, focused on ensuring the company would thrive under new leadership. During those months, something shifted in their relationship. Victoria started spending more nights at Ethan's apartment than her own. Her presence became woven into their daily routine, making breakfast while Ethan got Lily ready for school, helping with homework at the kitchen table, joining their weekend trips to the community center where Ethan still taught coding classes. She learned the particular rhythm of single parenthood, the constant negotiation between work and home, the guilt that came with every choice, the fierce protective love that colored every decision. And she contributed in ways both big and small. Paying for Lily's piano lessons without being asked, showing up at school plays, becoming someone Lily turned to naturally when she needed help or comfort. By October, it felt less like Victoria was visiting their life and more like she belonged in it. The restaurant was the same one where everything had started. Ethan had made the reservation weeks in advance, requesting the same table in the back corner where they'd sat on that first disastrous blind date. Victoria arrived wearing a dress the color of autumn leaves, her hair down, her expression curious. "Why here?" she asked as they sat down. Seemed appropriate, coming full circle. The waiter appeared, took their drink orders, disappeared. Around them, the restaurant hummed with the same elegant energy it had carried that night a year ago. But everything else was different. They were different. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Ethan asked. "When we were trying to figure out how to get through dinner without making it awkward? That we should pretend it never happened." "Right. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about how we started by trying to erase something that turned out to be the best accident of my life." Victoria's expression softened. "Mine too. I spent so many years being careful, making safe choices, building walls to protect Lily and myself from getting hurt again." He reached across the table for her hand. "And then you walked into this restaurant and destroyed every wall I'd built. Scared me to death. Made me question everything I thought I knew about what I wanted and what I could have." "Is this going somewhere, Miller?" Because you're making me nervous. He laughed, his own nerves making his hands shake slightly. Yeah, it's going somewhere. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket and set it on the table between them. Victoria's breath caught. I'm not good at grand gestures, Ethan said, and I can't promise you a life of luxury or excitement or any of the things you could probably have with someone more successful or sophisticated. What I can promise is this. Every day, I will choose you. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because you showed up when I was too scared to ask. Because you love my daughter like she's yours. Because you make me want to be brave. He opened the box. Inside was a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and understated, exactly Victoria's style. Victoria Hale, will you marry me? For a moment, she just stared at the ring. Then her eyes filled with tears. You're serious? Completely. You want to marry me? CEO, workaholic, type A control freak, Victoria Hale. Former CEO, he corrected, current love of my life, future stepmother to an 8-year-old who will absolutely test your patience and steal your heart in equal measure. Victoria laughed through her tears. I don't know how to do this. I've never been married, never lived with someone, never been anyone's stepmother. I don't know how to do it either. I failed at it once before, remember? What if we're terrible at it? Then we'll be terrible together. But somehow, I don't think we will be. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her processing, calculating, weighing risks the way she'd done her entire career. Then something shifted in her expression. A decision made, a leap taken. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly. Victoria stared at it, then at him, then started laughing. We're actually doing this. We're actually doing this. I'm going to be someone's wife, someone's stepmother. I'm going to have to learn how to braid hair and pack school lunches and remember to buy birthday presents for 8-year-olds. You already do most of that. I do, don't I? She looked delighted and terrified. When did that happen? Gradually, while you weren't looking. Ethan brought her hand to his lips. You didn't fall in love with just me, Victoria. You fell in love with the whole package, the bedtime stories and the burnt chicken and the chaos. You accepted all of it. Because it's not chaos, it's life. Messy, complicated, beautiful life. She squeezed his hand. When do we tell Lily? Tonight, if you're ready. I'm ready. They finished dinner in a happy daze, making plans and laughing about how they'd gone from strangers to engaged in just over a year. The same waiter who'd served them on their first date congratulated them with genuine warmth, saying he'd wondered if they'd work out after seeing them that first night. We were that obvious? Victoria asked. You were that hopeless, he said kindly, but in a sweet way. They drove to Ethan's apartment where Mrs. Chen was watching Lily. The older woman took one look at Victoria's face and smiled knowingly. Congratulations, she said simply, then left them to their evening. Lily was in her pajamas playing with the elaborate Lego structure on the living room floor. She looked up when they entered. You're home early. Did you have a bad date? Actually, Ethan said, sitting down on the floor beside her. Victoria joined them. We had a really good date, the best one. Better than the zoo? Different kind of good. He glanced at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly. Lily, you know how much Victoria means to us, right? To both of us? Yeah, she's your girlfriend, and my friend too. Right. Well, what if she became more than that? What if she became part of our family? Lily's eyes widened. Like forever. Like forever, Victoria confirmed. I asked your dad to marry me. She caught Ethan's look. Okay, he asked me, but I said yes, which means if it's okay with you, I'd become your stepmom. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, would you live here? With us? We'd probably get a bigger place, Ethan said. One with room for all of us. Maybe that yard you've been wanting. Could we get a puppy then? Victoria laughed. Let's take this one step at a time. But maybe eventually, Lily pressed. Maybe eventually. Lily looked between them, her 8-year-old mind working through the implications. Will you still be my dad? She asked Ethan, a note of worry in her voice. Always. That never changes. Nothing about us changes. We just add Victoria to the family. And you promise not to leave? Lily asked Victoria directly. Like Mom did? The question hung in the air, painful and necessary. Victoria didn't flinch from it. I promise, she said. I know promises are scary because sometimes people break them. But I'm making this promise not just to your dad, but to you. I'm here. I'm staying. You're stuck with me. Lily seemed to consider this. Then she launched herself at Victoria, wrapping her arms around her neck. Okay, you can marry Daddy, but you have to know that Mr. Trunks is very particular about new family members. He'll need to approve. Victoria hugged her tight. I'll make sure to get his blessing. Later, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch, her head on his shoulder, both of them still processing what they'd just committed to. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified. You? Absolutely. She twisted the ring on her finger. But also happy. Happier than I've been in years, maybe ever. Me too. When should we do it? The wedding? I don't know. What do you want? Something small, just family and close friends, nothing elaborate. Sounds perfect. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, making quiet plans for a future that had seemed impossible a year ago. Eventually, Victoria dozed off, and Ethan carefully extracted himself to check on Lily one more time. She was asleep. Mr. Trunks clutched in her arms, her new sketch journal open beside her bed. He picked up the journal to close it and saw she'd been drawing. The sketch showed 3 figures, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a small girl between them, all holding hands. Above them, in Lily's careful printing, My Family. Ethan felt his throat tighten. This was what he'd been protecting her from for so long. The risk of letting someone new into their carefully constructed world. The possibility of more heartbreak, more loss, more disappointment. But looking at that drawing, he realized Lily had been ready for this long before he was. She'd been waiting for him to be brave enough to choose hope over fear. He closed the journal, kissed his daughter's forehead, and went back to the living room where Victoria was starting to wake up. Stay tonight, he said. I don't have clothes here. Stay anyway. She smiled. Okay. They went to bed in his small room in the apartment that would soon become too small for their expanding family, and fell asleep planning for a future neither had thought they deserved. The wedding happened on a Saturday in early spring, a small ceremony in the same park where Ethan used to take Lily to the playground. Just immediate family, a handful of close friends, and Lily as the flower girl who took her responsibilities very seriously. Victoria wore a simple cream dress. Ethan wore the navy shirt from their first date. Lily wore purple and carried a basket of rose petals she distributed with mathematical precision. Jake served as best man and cried through the entire ceremony. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row with Lily's teacher and David from work. Even Marcus Reeves attended, having become something of an unexpected ally once the initial awkwardness faded. The vows were brief and honest. Ethan promised to love Victoria's fierce intelligence and her terrible singing voice in the car. Victoria promised to love his protective dad instincts and his habit of overthinking everything. They both promised to build a life based on trust and honesty and the courage to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lily cheered louder than anyone, and Victoria laughed as Ethan kissed her, both of them grinning like idiots. The reception was at a small restaurant, not the same one where they'd met, but similar in its quiet elegance. And as the sun set and the celebration wound down, Ethan found himself standing outside with Victoria, watching Lily show off her flower girl dress to Jake's kids. We did it, Victoria said. We did. No going back now. Would you want to? She looked at him, this woman who'd walked into his life by accident and changed everything. Not for a second. Good, because you're stuck with us. 2 Millers for the price of 1. 3 Millers, she corrected. I'm taking your name, remember? Victoria Miller still sounds weird. Give it time. It'll grow on you. Lily ran over, slightly out of breath, her flower crown askew. Can we go home now? My feet hurt. Sure, sweetheart, Ethan said. Let's go home. The 3 of them said their goodbyes and walked to the car together. As Ethan buckled Lily into her seat, she grabbed his hand. "Daddy? I'm glad you went on that date, even though you didn't want to." He smiled. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." They drove through Chicago as evening settled over the city, heading toward the new house they'd moved into last month. Bigger than the apartment, with the yard Lily had wanted and room for all of them to grow. Victoria reached over and laced her fingers through Ethan's free hand while he drove. This wasn't the life he'd planned, wasn't the careful, controlled existence he'd built after his divorce. It was messier and more complicated and infinitely richer than anything he could have designed alone. It was a blind date he didn't want that turned into a love he couldn't live without. It was a CEO and a single dad figuring out how to build a family against all odds. It was the courage to stop hiding and choose honesty, even when it was terrifying. It was everything he'd been too afraid to want, handed to him by accident and accepted with gratitude. As they pulled into the driveway of their new home, Lily already talking about decorating her room and Victoria laughing at something his daughter said, Ethan realized he'd finally stopped surviving and started living. And it was more than enough. It was everything.